The Golden Robe, written and read by Julian Brown. The Golden Robe, Part 6. Dictators come in every colour. The subject matter for this week's session was New Beginnings. There was an ominous tone to this title, with the sound of Chinooks and F-35 jets flying by overhead. In recent days, England had entered Serious Threat Level 4. This wasn't as serious as Level 5, where food rationing and curfews would be imposed, but was a worrying step away from the relative comfort of Level 3. At Serious Threat Level 6, a state of emergency would be officially declared, giving the military jurisdiction to take over the role of policing. All over social media, on TV and radio, were breaking news reports of Russian warships sighted off the west coast of Ireland. This, not long after the Russian Premier's veiled threat, bragging of possessing the military might to sink the United Kingdom and leave it beneath the waves like the fabled lost city of Atlantis. While from the east, hundreds of thousands of people fleeing the conflict made their perilous journey towards Britain's shores. The backlash from locals was intense and often violent. Protests against the mass influx of asylum seekers descended into riots outside centres where claims were being processed. Ironically, the parents and grandparents of many of the most vocal of these protesters faced a similarly hostile reception when they first arrived in England. Once again, Leopold was not in attendance, but as is often the case when two energies seek out each other with equal intensity, the ether conspires with itself to allow this meeting to take place. And so when the group broke for a 15-minute break, Laura sought out her secret smoking spot under the guise of needing the ladies' room. When she got there, there was a hooded figure sitting on the bench where she usually sat. With some irritation, she looked around to find another spot nearby where she could smoke alone. Laura! She heard her name come from the bench. The hooded figure turned to face her, pulling his hood back to reveal his face. Leopold! Sit down, please. They allow me out on the lawn for a few minutes every day. They are not far. They'll come to get me soon. They? The nurses. Well, if you can call them that. Mercenaries more like. How are you, Leopold? Oh, not so bad. Could be worse. It can always be worse. How are you? It's really good to see you again. I'm fine, thanks. I was just sneaking a quick cigarette. I didn't know you smoked. Nasty habit, you know. Yes, well, that's why I come down here so no one sees me. So it's okay as long as no one sees you. No, I mean, Laura, it's fine. We all have our vices, our secrets. Laura frowned. How did you know to find me here? Oh, not much passes my attention, Leopold said playfully, before taking a more serious tone. He continued. Having wealth can be a double-edged sword. People assume because you have money, you're happy. Because of this assumption, the rich often endure terrible poverty. One good thing about having money, though, is that when you can't see, you can pay others to see for you. Just then a bird flew by speedily in front of them, squawking loudly, as if to confirm the truth of Leopold's words. They followed the bird's flight path with their gaze, and their eyes fell upon a squirrel nibbling on an acorn, sitting upright on a low tree branch. It seemed to be staring directly at them both. Laura wondered how long it had been there. Dr. Mallowan said you haven't been well. I was told you were in a comatose state. Ah, yes, but I didn't swallow today. Leopold opened his fist to reveal 2 tablets in his palm. Realizing time was ticking away, Laura sparked up her cigarette and offered the pack to Leopold. Oh, no thanks, Laura. I can be accused of many things. Smoking is not one of them, though. It went silent between them for a few breaths as Laura toked away, steeling herself for her planned speech. Leopold, when we spoke last time, you mentioned something about the Golden Robe. On hearing mention of the robe, Leopold closed his eyes as if looking within himself for strength. Laura continued. Well, I did a little research and I found out a few things about this robe. The legend says he who wears the robe will become king. That made me think. Leopold interrupted her. Whether it works for women too. Yes, these ancient myths tend to focus on the man, mankind, as a man thinks and so on. I think that's got more to do with the prejudices of the translators than with the legends themselves. It should therefore read instead, whomever wears the robe shall rule over the whole of the earth. So it's true then? Laura asked. All these terrible things happening in the world right now. The war, the air raid sirens being tested every morning. This all has something to do with you, doesn't it? A knowing smile grew across Leopold's face. Oh yes, he thought. This war has everything to do with me, if only you knew the half of it. All the paths that lead back to me, my family, particularly me. We've been the main authority ensuring free energy suppression as a fundamental protocol universally, continuing the age-old legacy began by the robber barons, the oil moguls who silenced Nikola Tesla. There's always at least one like him in every generation. The persistent visionaries. Of course, we don't cut them down too early. It's good to let them blossom so we can take the entirety of their life's works and manipulate their ideas towards achieving our own agendas. Free energy. It's just not compatible with the setup we have. Of course we can draw all the energy we need directly from the ether in the atmosphere around us. But then how would we maintain our control? Oil has been central to all the world wars as a necessity to be fought over, a commodity to ensure endless war. Where would we be without it? Look how many millions of undesirables, the lower rungs of society that we overtly cull every year with our manufactured energy crisis, knowing fully well that not even one of those many millions of people had to die. Still, they continue, the visionaries, with their humanitarian ideas, their technology to produce clean drinking water from the air, their free electricity devices, all genius and no smarts. How could these people realistically think they'd have a chance to bring these visions into being in any meaningful way? Are they not able to discern the kind of world that we live in? Oh, Laura, as much as I enjoy being so mysterious, you don't know how much I'd like to share all of this with you. But something tells me that you're not ready, or maybe I'm not ready. Maybe I should lead you off the scent. Maybe I just like playing with you. Leopold eyed Laura staring back at him patiently, expectantly, and said, "You are quite impressive, aren't you? Despite your obvious affliction." "My affliction?" Laura shot back curiously. Leopold's eyes seemed to glaze over as he smiled. "Your skin. Your type always go on about how afflicted you are, how someone else apart from you is responsible for your life." Laura sensed where the conversation was going. "I don't consider my skin an affliction. I love my skin. I'm proud of my black culture and heritage." "Ha! What is black culture without some other race to blame? All your political movements have been based on how afflicted, how oppressed you are. The Black Panthers, Black Lives Matter. It's never what you stand for, is it? Always what you stand against. The police, white supremacy, the system. But I've never been able to work out what you actually stand for." "They are standing for justice, Leopold." "Justice? I guess when there's no justice, there's just us," Leopold said mockingly. "Exactly," shot back Laura, "and I bet you have no idea what it feels like being in that position. It's not a level playing field. Not everyone can afford fancy lawyers and top-level care at the Grove." "Well, your people love a heated argument and a fight, that's for sure," said Leopold dismissively. "I'm proud of my people, building literally from the ashes and achieving great things, from nothing but a vision and sheer determination," said Laura, refusing to take Leopold's bait to become enraged. "It's just not as simple as you put it, Leopold. There are many more layers to it. You've conveniently left out 400 years of forced enslavement from your analysis." Ah, yes, 400 years. Your people's answer to everything. I can't hold down a job. Can't keep my family together. I can't stay off the drugs. Well, let's just blame the white man and his slavery so we can still have some contrived modicum of dignity about ourselves. Laura was beginning to feel very annoyed, not banking on having this conversation, yet not surprised either, as race was always a topic lingering around, waiting to be unearthed. Well, I certainly don't blame anyone for my failures but me. You can't paint a whole race of people with that brush. Black people are not a monolith. What about the black conservatives who reject all that you say, who stand for personal responsibility, rebuilding the black family, the core values of integrity? Words, just words, a political necessity to distance themselves from the riffraff. I'm sorry, Laura. Maybe it's just my ignorance. I haven't had much actual interaction with your type. Apart from a few African dictators with a complex set of offshore accounts and semi-legal tax avoidance strategies, you know, the ones you read about in the news, who watch their people starve while they hide in their golden palaces. I've met quite a few of these in my lifetime. They are a sad representation of your so-called achievements. Dictators come in every colour, Leopold. We are in the middle of a world war started by a white Russian dictator as we speak. Let's put things into perspective. Leopold gave no response. Seeing her cigarette burning closer down to the tip, she decided to skip this irritating small talk and went straight in. You have the golden robe, don't you, Leopold? Laura continued, hoping he would answer soon. I think you have the robe, and you're not sure what to do with it now. I think you're meant to give it to me. And what would you do with it? Leopold finally spoke. Laura took a deep pull on the shrinking white stick. It's no secret that the golden robe is about power and control. Ah, but what kind of power? What kind of control? Said Leopold, more to himself than to Laura. It would be noble to say power over yourself, control over your emotions, your actions, answered Laura. And while that's all very lovely and new age, we all know who really has the power in this world. People like you. People who don't have to wait in line, who don't have to ask anyone's permission for anything. Dr. Malowan might not be so quick to agree with you there, joked Leopold. So this is what you want, he said, now in a more morose tone. Power and control, not to make things right. With power and control, I could make everything right, Laura said in the affirmative. But I'd need to make myself strong first. That's how you guys think, isn't it? Make sure your families, your children, your children's children will be secure and have all their needs taken care of. Why not? My family could run things just as well as any of you lot. Hoping to appeal to Leopold's lower nature, Laura pressed on with her words. I wouldn't want so many wars, of course, but I wouldn't completely end them either. I'm not naive. I know how profitable war is for the economy and the wealthiest families. Laura was met with a loud silence. Leopold sat completely still and seemed once again to have gone missing from his body. The vacant shell of Leopold sat next to Laura, unmoving, unresponsive. Leopold, are you there? Then, just as he spat out the words, the golden robe, at the end of their last conversation, today he ended their chat with a similarly cryptic message. I must return to the desert. Leopold suddenly jumped up from the bench and without another word marched away from Laura. He was met by the nurses at the end of the path who escorted him back to his room. Well, there was always next week, thought Laura, as she stamped out her cigarette in anger and began walking back to the main building. However, when Laura returned the following week and asked for Leopold, nobody at the Grove seemed to know who she was talking about. The nurses scratched their heads as if it was the first time they'd ever heard the name. Dr. Malowan said that there was no one by that name being treated at the Grove. But remember, You said he'd been having terrible nightmares and manic episodes. You had to put him in solitary, she cried. Dr. Mallowan, with a quizzical smirk on his face, said that was a fair description of at least 2/3 of the clientele here, adding, while laughing, that even some of the doctors and nurses fell into that category from time to time. Laura wondered now if Leopold ever existed. Ever since she had seen the golden robe in that mystical gift shop, life had been very strange for her in many ways. Maybe she needed to see a therapist herself. Had this all been just a very real daydream? Still, there was something in Dr. Mallowan's eyes, a knowing smile, which suggested to her that he was lying. As she made her way to the exit, a man was mopping the floor in blue overalls. He had just started, and Laura made the considerate gesture of trying to walk around and not over the wet floor. He turned towards her and met her gaze. "Leopold," she said in recognition, but the man corrected her, pointing to his name badge which read Stanley, and then smiled at her reassuringly. It wasn't him. The man's tattooed arms and muscular frame being the most obvious difference, and yet his face could easily be a double for Leopold's own. Laura smiled back. "Sorry, my mistake," and walked out of the building, now more confused than ever.